Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be talking all about Dolly Alderton's books. Do you know what? I wouldn't even say I'm a Dolly Alderton stan, but I have read basically her published works, not like, I know she has her column in, is it The Times or something like that? I haven't read that, and I haven't listened to the podcast that she used to do with Pandora, the high-low. It's not really the kind of thing I'm interested in. But I've read her published work, so I feel like perhaps I can speak on it. So I'm not going to make this video very long and go through like reviews, because actually, in actual fact, I have done 2 reviews on her books already. The reason I wanted to do this video is because there is one more I want to talk about that I don't know that like loads of people have read, just because of the way it was done. But the first book that I ever encountered from her, which is her first book she ever published, is Everything I Know About Love. So I have done a full review video on that book. I think it's one of my most popular reviews on my channel, to be fair. So I would just link that above and down below. I gave that book 5 stars. Do you know what? I do know on a second read that tone might lower. It might not the tone, the star rating might lower, it might not, because I have watched that video back and I feel I talk about the positives and negatives of that book for myself, like in general, but also for myself and how I feel about it, but still I'm able to overcome and give it 5 stars. And I think the gleamingly obvious one is the sort of level of just access and privilege that she had. But you know, when someone's writing a memoir and it's their life, like, you know, poo-poo, privilege does suck, like, you know, in so many ways, but I can't in so many ways fault someone for their privilege. Like, I just, you know, I really enjoyed the writing, the way the book made me feel, it made me laugh, like, so I don't know, I think I talk about the sort of drawbacks of that book, and like in a way that is, I don't know, relevant to me, but how I was still able to overcome it and still give it 5 stars basically. I just couldn't really fault the book, but I don't know if upon reread I might be like, oh, actually I don't know about that. But you know, I talk about all of that in that video. But honestly, when I think back to the reading experience of that book, I still think, wow, I remember reading and thinking, I love this book so much. I love the way she talked about her friendship growing up in London, or at least like the outskirts of London. It was interesting to see, because obviously she went to Exeter, which I think is quite like middle class in terms of like the actual area, and then the uni and stuff like that as well. But her time in London and obviously her experience like once she left uni was all kind of like very much in the middle class like vein and things like that. Things I couldn't relate to, but at the same time things that I enjoyed reading about. But I also like the inclusion of the recipes she had in that book, and just really little anecdotes that she had in that book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So yes, that was a piece of her work that I really enjoyed. And then I actually next went on to read Hopeless Romantic by her. So, ooh, what has just fallen out? Oh, okay, but yeah, cool. So because after I read Everything I Know About Love, I was just like, I love Dolly Alderton, right? Even though I clearly didn't love her enough to listen to the podcast. Like, at the time I wasn't really into podcasts, and I think the level of privilege would annoy me if I started listening to the high-low, because I know her other co-host is quite like, I don't know, she's very wealthy and whatnot. So I think they would talk about things and I would just get really annoyed. So I decided to save myself that hassle. Plus, I really wasn't into podcasts at the time. But yeah, so this was a collaboration with I think they were an online publisher called The Pound Project. I really feel like I should know more about them. This was, I can't remember what year I purchased this in, but it was after Everything I Know About Love was produced. And The Pound Project says, small change, one story at a time. So this is, I think it's just a sticker, and it just says exactly what I just read out. And they actually have loads of collaborations with loads of different authors, and they release like little small books like this where the author has just written like an essay essentially, and it's very small. But what is nice about this is it is signed by Dolly. Oh, you can't even see that. Oh my god. So I might have to do a cutaway for this, but it is signed by her, and you just feel how much of a stan I was at that time. I mean, I kind of still am. You know, she used to tweet a lot more back then and things like that. I feel like sometimes, yeah, when your book gets published and people have a lot of things to say about your book and your writing and things like that, perhaps you just pull back. I know she also pulled back when she was writing Ghosts and things like that, but I feel like people have a lot more to say to you and about you once like your book has gone a bit viral and things like that. So yeah, she used to write a lot on Twitter and things like that. She doesn't really do that anymore. But yeah, so clearly I'm as a stan, I meant to go and publish this. This was actually so nice. So I think around the time that, the other thing I'm going to discuss before I discuss this is clearly after she published Everything I Know About Love, or at the same time, she released a podcast that I actually really enjoyed, but haven't actually finished listening to, even though I enjoyed the episodes I listened to so much, which is called like Love Stories with Dolly Alderton, where she just interviews different people. Let me pull it up because it was so nice, the ones that I listened to, and I think you can still listen to it on SoundCloud. So yeah, it's still available on SoundCloud, and there are 16 episodes, and she basically sits down with, I would say they're like well-known British figures, I would say. So the first one is Vanessa Kirby, who does sound really familiar to me, but I don't know who that is, but I listened to that one. The second one is with Cosmo Landsman. I actually think he's American. I remember listening to his one and looking up his name because I think he's written a book, because his stories were just so wild. And then another one, Ruby Tandor, which I think she might have been on Great British Bake Off. I could be wrong, again, it's not something that I watch. And then Bryony Gordon, again, I think she's an author, maybe she's somewhere in the British scene. So those are definitely the first one I've listened to. And she basically sits down with these characters and they speak about love, they speak about the sort of different experiences of romantic love they've had in their life. I'm not sure if there's also talk about friendship in there, but I feel like there is. And they sort of talk about like what their parents were like in love and things like that. And it's so nice. It, in a way, reminds me of Modern Love. If you have not listened to the Modern Love podcast, I implore you to. Like, I kind of don't listen to it anymore because honestly, I would listen to it and it would just make me want to cry. Like, I'd be on the bus when I used to commute to work and I would just be like, tears about to form from these eyes. I actually remember the last time I listened to it, my boyfriend was going to the doctors and I listened to it in the car, and it was like early in the morning, woken up, and we'd driven there and stuff like that, and then I was listening to it and I was just bawling in the car. He came back and I was just bawling, and it was just like, I'm not crying because I'm sad, but these stories are so emotional, they evoke so much emotion in you. But yes, so Love Stories reminds me of that, and I just wanted to touch on that quickly, that if you really like everything I know about love, Love Stories is a really nice podcast to listen to. I should really go back and finish the rest. I think, again, I was just so overwhelmed by some of the stories I was hearing. It really is a podcast about learning from your past and your grief and those sort of like past loves that you had and how things didn't work out, how some things perhaps you didn't want to work out, or how you're so happy that you left some of the sort of love that you thought you had, those relationships that you thought were good, but now you look back and you're just like, I'm so glad I left. There's a lot of reflection in there, and I think perhaps that's also what got me to stop listening to it, because like I love the reflection, but the emotion was very overwhelming for me, so I just kind of pulled back from it. But that was another thing by her that I absolutely loved, and I just think, I don't know, she's clearly very talented in so many aspects. Like, I know in her book she mentions like working on like the beginnings of like Made in Chelsea and things like that. Like, she clearly had a finger in so many pies and is very talented. Like, I totally sound like a complete stan, I promise I'm not. So yeah, back to this, because like really what I wanted to make this video was to talk about this, really, which is Hopeless Romantic, which is an essay about love, which is her basically talking about, on the similar vein to the sort of, I guess, her podcast, maybe this was also done towards her podcast, is about how she feels about love. And it's just beautifully written. So there is an intro here by, I guess, maybe perhaps the founder or something like that. And it says, I met Dolly at Northampton Square in the autumn of 2019. We were studying journalism at City University London. Our first job was to cover a newsbeat in the borough of Camden, and it goes on whatever. Then it says, years later, when I started the PAM project, I immediately thought of Dolly. She's entirely passionate about writing, and we have stayed in touch here and there to talk about why the craft of storytelling is so crucial. Dolly writes with her soul. She knows words are comfort to the solitude. Choose any of her stories or articles, and they will make sense, from the difficulty of watching friends settle down to this we keep to comprehend life's milestones, which is obviously a reference to everything I know about love. So it says here, as you will see in this essay, Dolly is hopelessly romantic, about her parents, about old musicals, about Soho, about romance itself. It is a love story of passion and dependency. Love here is above, nothing is held back. And that's what this is about. It's so cute. I think I need to like reread it again just to sort of be like, oh my god. But I read it before I did this video and I just thought, yes, I definitely want to make this video. But she literally just starts it off with, I call it romantic young. I don't know who or what exactly gave it to me, but I know I contracted it before I was a teenager. For the extortionate sum of £80 an hour in my late 20s, week in, week out, I sat on a sofa opposite a tough-talking Australian woman in a chair and tried to work out where I might have picked it up. Was it from my mum and dad? Of course it was from my mum and dad. Mum and dad are the answer to every equation when you're sitting in one of those sofas in one of those rooms. She talks about the music that inspires her, like to love and things like that. Theatre inspires her. One of the bits I really like is here, where she says, we all enable each other to. Over Sauvignon, we listen to the love stories about new love or lost love or unrequited love. We revel in the details of the hand that brushed away the strand of hair before the first kiss, or the specific word used to say the last goodbye. We send each other screen grabs of text at the beginning of a relationship, and we underline, annotate, and analyse enthusiastically. And when our friends finally bore of talking about it, we go hunting for treasures. And she just talks about so many little things that I think I could relate to, in terms of just that little bit about indulging in love when we like meeting friends and things like that. It's always been a huge topic, like when you catch up with friends after a while and things like that. And I don't know, reading this, I was very much convinced of how like I really enjoyed her writing. I thought this was really nicely well written. This is, how many pages long is this? 34 pages long. It's probably about 30 if you take into account, I don't know, does the page numbering start from forward? Yes, if you take into account the page numbering. The only thing about talking about this and talking about how much I love her and how well written it is I don't know if you can actually get it anymore. It was done specifically for this project, and they released like a certain number, and then that's the sort of print run that they do, and they'll do it for other authors. So I know her co-host with the High Low Pandora got one. I know one of the singers from, there was a band, there were two brothers or two friends that did a band, and they got one. Like, they just feature loads of like different celebs basically, I would say, and publish essays from them, and you just kind of had to be in the know about it really. But this was beautiful. It was a really lovely piece of her writing that I think is quite underrated, just simply because not a lot of people have access to it or know about it. So yeah, I guess I talked about the podcast, I've talked about that book, and the final thing to talk about is her story, her newest release, Ghost, which I think was released last year, was it? Again, it's not something I'm going to dwell on or talk about because I have already done, I didn't do a full review video on it. I talked about it in one of my sort of recent sort of reads. I think it was books that I think I gave like 2 stars or less or something like that. And yes, I gave Ghost 2 stars. For me, Ghost would have been 3 stars had it not been for the 75% of the way when something happened in the book. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a natural progression for this character. Like, this is very canned. For me, Ghost read like any sort of, I know loads of people hate the term for it, but I don't mind it, but perhaps, you know, actually I should mind it, and I'm just not well, not very knowledgeable about it, but chick lit. It very much read like a lot of chick lit, and I like chick lit. I don't have actually anything against chick lit. I read a lot of chick lit, not recently in the past like 5 years, but I have done in the past. Every time I go back to it, I'm like, these books are so nice, so easy to get through, so light, love it, here for it. And honestly, reading it, it reminded me of that. Nothing stuck out to me. I wasn't like, oh my god, wow, which is interesting because I actually think perhaps maybe fiction, non-fiction is where her talents lie the most, but how many times are you going to write about yourself? I mean, she could produce a lot more memoirs and whatnot about different things in her life, like themed in some way. But I thought her fiction, it was pretty like average in the chick lit genre. It read just like the rest of them, which is fine to me because, you know, I don't know, that is fine to me. I honestly had no problem with the book. Like, I wasn't blown away by it, but I was like, cool, this is a good piece of writing, I'm enjoying it. And then it got to a scene where it's just like, I don't actually think our character would do this. I don't know what purpose this serves. I know what purpose it served. It was to sort of tie up the story with the main character and this other character, whatever. But it just took me out of the story, especially like when I think more about the overall story. I also think there were some like other little holes in the story as well, which I was willing to forgive, because actually one thing I feel like when I read a lot of chick lit is a lot of it was, at least the ones I read, was written in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and they don't have a lot of the sort of current like technology or like way we say things or do things or things like that would just make it very current. And I felt like Ghost actually was very current in terms of like the ghosting and things like that, and the different things like her friends were saying and doing. I found it very current and topical, to me at least. So I really enjoyed it for that aspect. But when I think back to it a little bit more, just about sort of the storyline with her father and just like when they go on this hen do and like one of her friends, they were kind of annoying. Like, when not the dad was annoying, her friend was annoying, but when I think about it, sort of those little plot holes, I don't think I like it as much as when I was actually reading it and thinking it was okay. So I think that's all I want to say. Do you know, long gone really for me are the days where I used to read everything an author published, and I feel like because Dolly's backlist is so short, like I have basically read everything she's published. But I would like to do more videos talking about authors and like their works that I have read. But for this video, for the Dolly Alderton video, yeah, if you're interested in hearing about my thoughts more about her 2 books, like I said, I will link her reviews in the the reviews that I've done of her books in the description box below, so you can hear more about my thoughts and feelings about them. But that is it for today's video about my little sort of blast about Dolly Alderton. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know like your thoughts about her books, if you have read her books, if you're planning on reading her books. I don't know, just share anything you want with me in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you in another one. Bye.